Let's get sweaty.
Hello and welcome back to the Shenmue Dojo show. We are back after a short break after the absolute madness that was Shenmue the animation and 13 solid weeks of nose to the grindstone. Oh, with me, as always, is Mr. Grindstone himself, Matthew Oliver. How are things with you, man?
Yeah, good. Enjoying the rest and recuperation from a hard slog for 13 weeks. Worth every second, don't get me wrong. But man, when we finished that, I was a relieved man. Tired and relieved, but good now. Ready to go again. How's it going for you?
Oh, still manic here, to be fair. I've been pushing through my university work. It's about an hour and 20 minutes off the deadline the other day, but it's all in and all done now, so I can breathe a little bit more until, of course, Shenmue World Shipping takes over my nights for a few weeks, starting from like the 14th. But yeah, that light at the end of the tunnel we spoke about a while back, for me at least, is starting to appear. I can't wait to have a bit of a free head again. It isn't clouded with all this Shenmue stuff that's going on. Right, so man, the episode we've got today is something we recorded way back in January at the start of the year, actually. It was primed and ready to release literally, I think, on the day of the anime release announcement, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
Or close to. So we didn't want to release like a completely random topic and for either end to sort of get overshadowed. So this has been on the back burner for a few months now whilst we watched and recorded the anime episodes, but now it's finally time to share this to the world, for better or worse.
Yeah, you strap yourselves in for this one, guys. It's a bit of a roller coaster from what I remember. I haven't listened back to it for months, so I'm going to be very intrigued to see what people think of this one.
Yeah, I did listen back to it earlier today just to sort of get my mindset of what we need to do to like bring this back up to date, but I thought it was okay. I think it's going to be an enjoyable episode for everyone. We'll get into what it is about in a moment, but before we get into today's feature discussion, we're going to run through some of the modern day news topics that have happened, which you may have missed if you've switched off since the end of the anime run. So first up, Matt, the Game Jam April 2001 prototype discs. So if you've not seen this so far, this is a prototype build of Shenmue 2 for the Dreamcast that was shown off, I believe, at Game Jam, which was like a gaming event in April 2001. It was purchased from a Japanese auction site by myself, Laurent of Sega Dreamcast Info Games, and Lemon Haze. And those guys, along with Safarad, Switch, Jerome Ferrom, and Anichi, helped to make this project become available for everyone to enjoy. So we've kind of been playing it a little bit on stream in recent times, Matt, but what is it about this particular build that's quite special, would you say?
Oh, I'll start with the sort of building up, I think, because there's some really good stuff towards the end, a nice Easter egg, for want of a better expression. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons, obviously, made to the final product. Signs are different, for example. Moving through some of the cutscenes, they're shot at different camera angles. I'm thinking specifically, for example, the Shenmue tree scene with Shenhua and Ryo when they obviously hit Shenhua's house. The camera shots there are very, very different. Likewise with the initial sort of demo trailer at the start of the game as well. That's shot very differently. There's lots of things that are incomplete. I'm thinking the cave, for example. Half of that actually hasn't been modelled in yet. So when you're in there putting the Sword of Seven Stars in, the cave doesn't actually exist. You just sort of stood in this random sky. And I think the mirrors are in the background, but that's about as much as you get. And then sort of the highlight, the only way I'm going to describe this one, there's two highlights. One is a load of text was found detailing Mao Village and what its purpose was, why Ryo was there. I won't go into it here. Go and visit the forums. There's a massive topic on all of it. Land DC and a number of the team who obviously discovered and worked on this project have filled that in. But we've got a lot of closure around Mao Village now and why it was there, which is 20 years in the making. Fantastic to see that. And then The last one is there was a model of Yu Suzuki in the game dressed as Ryo Hazuki, which the team then got working, and now you can play Shenmue 2 Game Jam build as Yu Suzuki, which we did sort of debut on the stream when we showed this off earlier in May. And I think everyone it's a popular mod or version of that game.
Yeah, definitely, man.
It's brilliant. It's there's some good stuff in there. Things are being found all the time as well. I mean, go on the forums. There's a topic on there with screenshots, comparisons, a lot. It's a massive undertaking, and credit to everybody involved for getting hold of the thing, and it doesn't end up in some random collector's hands who does nothing with it. And then once they've got it in hand, is getting it dumped and starting things off so it can come out to the public and we can have all this stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it's been really cool actually seeing this early build of the game where, like you say, a lot of it's unfinished, or I don't know some of the reasons why they changed some of the cutscenes, to be honest, because some of the angles and camera shots were already really good, but it just shows the attention to detail and, that they're never fully satisfied. They kept going back and, tweaking it. So if you want to get involved, you can I'll put a link in the description, but you can also head over, like Matt says, to the forums where there's a full-on topic, people detailing some of the differences they found between this and the final release on the Dreamcast or whatever. So if you want to go and have a play yourself, maybe you want to play as Yu Suzuki, or if you want to have a go at trying to find some hidden things that we might not have discovered yet, different things compared to the final game, you can do so at your own leisure. All you'll need is some sort of a Dreamcast emulator to play it on your PC, or you can actually, if you know how to do it, burn the discs and play it on actual hardware, which is really cool as well. But like I say, there's all the details are in that forum topic, or actually on Lawrence's website as well, which is Sega Dreamcast Info Games Preservation.com. I'll put the link anyway below because it's a bit of a mouthful, that one. So next up, Matt, brand new game announced from Wisenet. It's not Shenmue 4. What is it?
Space Harrier 2. No, it's called Air Twister, and if anybody's seen the trailer for it, which I'll chuck in the video so you can see it, it is very much Space Harrier. It's a spiritual successor to Space Harrier in my mind. You play this woman who looks like saving her planet or something, and she's flying around on a swan, shooting aliens, beans, and God knows what else in between. The mechanics are Space Harrier, hands down, but then it's Yu Suzuki making it, so it doesn't surprise me. And it does tie into some previous interviews that he's talked about wanting to make a shooting game of some description. I think this is probably where it is. I think it's self-published, but it is coming over to Apple Arcade. So it's an Apple Arcade exclusive at this point. It looks like Apple have put some money in towards the development of this in exchange for exclusivity. So to access it, you're going to need an Apple device of either an iPhone, iPod Touch, Mac, MacBook, or Apple TV, and it has to have iOS 14 or above, I believe. I just double check that. It might even be 13, but one of those, you can Google it and check it anyway. It uses touchscreen if you've got an iPad or whatever, or you can hook up a controller to it as well. I'm pleased to see Wisenet doing a new game. I know it's not Shenmue 4, so I'm sure there's an air of disappointment, especially when we consider the 110 rumours which were going around, and just sort of fill that gap, if you like. This is nothing to do with 110 at all. This is Wisenet and Apple as a partnership together doing this. So 110 don't even have a finger in the pie sort of thing with this. So those rumours that have gone quiet at the moment haven't been dispelled or proven, essentially. They're still there. But I just wanted to clear that up right now. But watching the trailer, I'm looking forward to playing this. I think we're going to stream it if we can get ourselves together. But it looks good. I'm up for this game. I'm well up for playing this.
Yeah, definitely, man. I reckon touching on the 110 Industries thing there, that could be a reason why we've not heard anything, because they don't want to overshadow this particular project, which is releasing on June the 24th. I'm not sure if you said that, Matt, but yeah, so it's very soon, within the next few weeks at least. Well, yeah, it is literally June the 24th. You can play it with the controller as well. I'm not sure if you said that either. I'm just going through some of my notes here. So there's also 19 original full-length tracks from Dutch composer Valencia, who Yu Suzuki's actually a long-time fan of. And I was actually looking on his website, and I didn't realise he'd been going for so long as well. He met Michael Jackson back in the day, and
oh wow,
yeah, and he was quite a fairly big name then, this Valencia guy. So Yu Suzuki must have been following him for a long time now, by the sounds of things. And yeah, again, it just says like it was, or it looks like, I don't know if it actually said this in the description or whatever, but it looks like it's taken inspiration from games such as Rares and Panzer Dragoon as well. So if you're into these sort of games, Space Area Rares, Panzer Dragoon, I think this is going to be a game for you.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
so definitely get this on your list there. You can actually, if you've got an iPhone or an Apple device, you can actually search on the App Store now in the arcade thing, type Air Twister in, and it's already there. The page is set up so you can watch the trailer, view the screenshots, read the information on it. And you can, I think the get button basically just adds notifications. So once it's available, it'll notify you, ping you on your phone or whatever, and you can actually download it and play it. So that's something to look forward to. And it's nice, again, to see, Yu Suzuki with another game, especially going back to his arcade roots here. Hopefully it does well for him. Fingers crossed.
Definitely.
So next up, Matt, we've got Wave 3. Did we speak about Wave 2? We must have done probably towards the end of the anime show run.
I think it
But
was
Wave
mentioned.
3, yeah, I'm sure we would have mentioned it. But Wave 3 has started today, I believe. So I don't know. I hadn't noticed if they've been keeping in sync with the Shenmue Day 4th of every month, or this is just happens to be Wave 3 is the 4th of June. But that's started now. So if you're anywhere near Yokosuka in Japan, Dobita Street, if you can get over there, I know it's difficult, flights and stuff, but if you're able to, head down, do what you did for the first two waves, or check out details of what you can do, but just go around the shops buying stuff, and they'll give you postcards while this event is actually on. And there's I think there's new artwork up,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that's really cool. Go check those things out. I've got a note here on the anime rerun audience, Matt. I don't know if you've got the figures, but we believe it's doing well again,
Yeah.
re-airing on, is this on Adult Swim again?
Yeah, so they've done as soon as the anime finished in early May. 2 weeks later, on May the 14th, it then started a rerun on Adult Swim, and this is also while it's airing in Japan currently as well. So it's airing everywhere, which is great. And you probably saw on the forums, it was sort of hitting around sort of 200,000 a week viewers on Adult Swim, which is phenomenal. It was outperforming a lot of other well-established anime. Now, predictably, there was a drop-off. Don't get me wrong. It's also been moved to the graveyard shift. So rather than heading up the Adult Swim Toonami block at midnight, it's now at 3 a.m. in the morning in Pacific time. But actually, the audiences have held quite steady. They're averaging 120,000 people watching this, and it's a rerun. So, yeah, there's been a drop off, but I'm very, very impressed that we have such either a devout audience or a new audience coming into this and enjoying the thing. And this is a rerun, so this isn't, this, they just put this back on because for whatever reason, and it's doing well, outperforming and other established franchises again.
Do we know if when they're totaling the rankings or the viewership or whatever, do they add the reruns on top of the original run, or is that a separate thing?
It's a separate thing, so the statistics are very separate. So the premiere run will have its own set of statistics, and the rerun will have its own set of statistics, which you can find. And I can put a link. I can get a link in the description below, so you can have a look for yourself. But I'm genuinely surprised. Like, I thought there'd be a huge drop off, and it's like, yeah, you might get some stragglers, but when you're sort of holding at sort of 50% your premiere run with a rerun, I think that says volumes for the anime, the marketing, the quality of the product as well that's gone out there. And as long as it's performing well in Japan, which I believe it is, this has got to put us in good stead for a second season. And if you want a second season, tell Crunchyroll about it, because they're the ones that hold the keys to the kingdom in this regard. So but that's why we have a new hashtag for Shenmue Day as well, which is hashtag Shenmue Anime 2, which we'll be using on the 4th of every month going forward as well.
Yeah, and I believe it's meant to have been the most successful Crunchyroll original so far, right? I don't know how many they've done, but
yeah,
that's something I heard. Yeah.
I've heard that, and I mean, I've heard figures knocked around that they've had like 1 million a week viewership across Adult Swim and Crunchyroll. Now, I haven't seen these statistics myself to verify anything like this, but assuming that's correct, that is huge. That is massive for Shenmue. 1 million people watching this every week. That's 1 million people that could buy a Shenmue 4, in theory. Now, not everybody's going to. Of course they're not. You're going to get some drop-off and all the rest of it. But if you're talking about widening a market, well, there you go,
Yeah. Well, if 1 million people bought Shenmue 4,
Oh, you'd be
I think we'd
sold.
be
You'd be
set
set.
for life, wouldn't we?
Well, yeah, of course we would. That yeah,
Yeah.
if Shenmue 4 made did 1 million copies, I think for what is considered a niche franchise, everybody would be very very pleased with it. I would be. I know Cedric wanted 1 million for Shenmue 3, but obviously that didn't happen, unfortunately. But this says to me there's massive potential here in Shenmue. They just need to get it out there the right way and market it the right way and present it the right way. If they do all that, then this franchise is in a fantastic position, way
Mhm.
better than where we were before the E3 2015, before Shenmue 3. I think we'd have taken this back then. We'd have absolutely taken it, and we need to take advantage of it now. This is the thing. We can't rest on our laurels here. We have to keep pushing, because if we stop now, all that work we did all those years ago is for nothing. We need to get the story finished one way or the other.
We actually have good momentum as well, and I'll piggyback onto the next topic here, which is Shenmue 3 on PS Plus in Japan. So this is another good thing. So if you've been taken into the Shenmue ethersphere, whatever the word is, by the anime, perhaps you picked up 1 and 2 by now. I don't know. They're always on sale. But if you haven't and you're interested in picking up the next part of the story, as it were, following on from the anime, here's Shenmue 3 that's available on PS Plus in Japan at the moment. But because it's in Japan and they've got their service early, it's kind of, well, you'd assume that once that service reaches the West, a similar sort of game list or whatever, and Shenmue 3 should be part of that, right?
I'd be very, very surprised if it wasn't. And it surprised me because PS Plus, as we know, it's been put into tiers now. You've got Essential, you've got Extra, and you've got the Premium. So what they've done is they put Shenmue 3 into the Extra bit. So you pay, I think it's $15 a month, and you get a raft of games with it. And I don't know what the take-up will be from Essential PlayStation Plus, which is your bog standard one, all the way through to the other tiers. But the fact that it's on there now, and the fact it could, in theory, end up in almost every PlayStation owner's home is massive. And people who've, like you say, watched the anime may go, do you know what? Sod it. I'll put down $15. I'll download a few games, see what I think of them. Shenmue 3 could be one of them. And then they could enjoy it. I know it's a long time in coming. I know lots of people who wanted to play the game would have already played it, but there are more people out there who then have access to it. Now, get Shenmue 1 and 2 on there as well, and I'm a happy man. But this came out of left field as well. Like, this slipped well under the radar. Nobody announced it. It popped up on Twitter, and we were like, what? Where's this come from?
Yeah.
So, but do you know what? I'll take it. I'll happily take it. It should have been on there ages ago, in my view, anyway.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Shenmue 1 and 2 should have been in the lead up into Shenmue 3's being released. But that's not, obviously, that's not down to Wisenet or anything. That was a decision by Sega for whatever reason, and they're the IP holder, and that's their call to make, I guess.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, maybe this is specifically Shenmue 3 because of that Shenmue marketing deal that Sony was involved with.
Yeah,
that we do speak about in this. That's what made me think of that, because I heard that earlier today when we were talking about this back in January. But let's just wrap up some last little bits of the news now. So merch-wise, Matt, soundtrack news. This is regarding the anime, right?
Yeah, so obviously there's a clamour for merchandise. We've obviously seen the pouches and some of the postcards knocking around, and everybody wants a soundtrack. I want a soundtrack. James wants a soundtrack. Everybody wants a soundtrack. And we might be getting one. In an interview, I think it was on Famitsu, I'd have to check it again. They were talking about potential of a soundtrack, and they are talking about putting one together and releasing one, and to keep an ear out for some future news going forward around that, which it's a no-brainer for me. Blu-ray release, soundtrack at the minimum in this, and that I personally could make t-shirts and everything else, but everybody's talking about wanting a soundtrack. Well, it looks like we're going to get one. We just need to keep an ear to the ground, and hopefully that materializes. I'd be buying that day one.
Yeah, I wonder if it will after either the Japanese show run's finished, or perhaps the rerun of the Adult Swim, or maybe
possibly
both once they've finished, and then they can start thinking about soundtrack and Blu-ray or whatever. And talking about soundtracks, obviously everything from limited run games is shipped now. That includes the complete edition for Shenmue 3. What were your thoughts on that quickly, Matt? Just the complete edition now that we finally got it?
I mean, I did an unboxing video on it. I thought generally the product was good. I had an issue with the they were going to be character posters, weren't they? And they were dropped down sort of leaflets. And I don't like saying this because I'm quite positive about generally the things that limited run games do. Their stuff's 9 times out of 10 brilliant. But this felt cheap. It honestly felt cheap. The rest of it was great. The soundtrack was really good. The LP set was fantastic. It felt really nice in hand. Some of the artwork was brilliant in that as well. But I just felt that those character posters felt really cheap. But then flip it, the sort of 7 stars out of that complete edition. That's awesome. I absolutely love that. It's got pride of place on my shelf. It's
same here.
That took me by surprise. It's really cool.
I think everything else included in that set was spot on. To be honest, I loved, everything that was in there. The Choba-chan figures, like you say, the Sword of the Seven Stars, amongst the other things that were in that box. I know there was like maps and that Hotel Niawu poster thing and whatever.
Yeah.
And those were generally well done. It was literally just those character cards that didn't really, I don't know. In the end, I could take or leave them. But if they were what they originally touted as posters, I think that would have been amazing. But it wasn't to be. No problem though. And finally, Matt, just before we close up the news, WiseNet have got a brand new website. This is where you can see stuff on Air Twister, and they've got information on Shenmue 3 on there, but it looks really cool website. Go check it out if you haven't already. And that is along with a brand new YouTube channel for WiseNet that I'll put all these links in the description, the show notes below, and you can go and check these out. So that is a wrap for the news for this, and that's a wrap for me and Matt for this particular live moment. We're going to head into the pre-recorded segment now that we had since the start of the year. Hope you really enjoy the show, guys. If there is anything in there that sounds a little bit off or a little bit outdated, that is the reason why. So if we talk about the anime and it sounds like we haven't seen it yet, or we're talking about the trailers of the anime rather than the actual show, it's because we recorded this at the start of the year. So enjoy, guys, and we'll see you on the next show.
See you later.
Okay, that was Back of Credits Title 4 from Shenmue 3. Really nice piece, that. It's a shame, actually, it only ever got used in the back of credits, but you can say that with a few pieces of music, actually, from the back of credits. There's some nice stuff in there. Got another one later in the show. So, what we hope to achieve with this show is to break down everything that you may think you have ever heard about Shenmue 3. So, it's Kickstarter, the rewards, its PC launcher, deals, marketing, those sort of things that were like thrown around willy nilly and, all these clickbait media headlines. And we're going to try and give the solid facts from a Shenmue fan, or like I say, the facts. It's not like we're just making things up to present Shenmue always in the best light. This isn't our rebuttal. These, like I say, these are just straight facts. We're just telling you how it is. So stick around, and perhaps there's going to be something in here that you maybe you weren't aware of, or whenever you see someone perhaps bad mouthing an aspect of Shenmue moving forward, you can present the facts to them in a manner that they can't deny, basically. If we're going to get that deep anyway. So let's jump straight into it. Matt, what is the first point that we're going to cover?
So this seems quite a natural point to start, really. And I'm just going to make a little disclaimer before we go sort of diving into this. We're trying to look at this from a balanced point of view. Also not painting everybody in the games media industry with the same brush at all. I just want to make that disclaimer now, but these are things that we know were quite honestly factually incorrect, and yet people ran with them. So I just want to put it out there that we're not being knobheads for the sake of it and paint everybody with the same brush, just as a little disclaimer there. But
yeah,
I won't.
And this is like what I was saying up front at the top of the show, where as soon as these headlines are out there, they just spread like wildfire. And it's very hard to contain that fire once it's out there, because people's opinions, and it's so quick to poke fun or hatred towards something that you're not completely aware of. You're just following what people are presenting you as facts, when in actual reality, there's, like I say, there's always another side to these stories. And I mean, hopefully a lot of people did go into that open-minded, because obviously at the end of the day, a lot of media, and again, like Matt says, we're not particularly trying to pick on certain websites or gaming media coverage people here in general. We picked out articles that we thought they had actually done this at the time, but obviously you've got that sort of clickbait mindset where they're trying to spin a story in what's going to generate them the most clicks,
exactly,
going to generate the most income, because obviously their website, their livelihoods are based off of a viewership to their website, and they're going to get ad revenue or whatever appears on that page. So if they can entice people into reading that story up front, they're going to make more profit in the long run. And obviously you're going to get some editors on the websites that are favorable towards certain games, and they don't want that kind of spin that sort of tale. So like I say, not every single outlet that we're doing here is every single time they put out a headline, or it is this sort of Shenmue thing. But for some reason in particular, Shenmue 3 seemed to be heavily picked on, and I'm not too sure why. Perhaps it was like they didn't feel like just having a regular Shenmue 3 headline would generate clicks. They could put out a fairly generous article about Red Dead Redemption 2, and they know, because of the name, people are going to click it whether it's good or bad. It doesn't really matter. But for Shenmue 3, perhaps that was a different story. I'm just saying this thing like in my own opinion here, but maybe they didn't know. Again, we've always had this thing with Shenmue where no one knows how to market it, so maybe they didn't even know how to create a story that would get people enticed into reading. So they had to go with a slightly stirring the pot sort of headline.
That's a very good view on that, James. Actually, I hadn't thought of it that way. I mean, I've always been of the opinion that they lost their clickbait when Shenmue 3 got announced at the at 2015. The whole rumor thing, the clickbait of Shenmue's ever happening, blah blah blah.
Which kind of does work the same, doesn't it? So if they've lost that, they've got to try and find something shocking enough to get attention again. And perhaps just like, Yu Suzuki's doing this and Shenmue isn't good enough. It needs to have some sort of a shock element to it to actually be beneficial for the website.
Yeah, and that fits in actually quite nicely with the first sort of topic of this discussion we're covering, which is obviously the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter announcement. I mean, 2015, I stand by it. It was probably, one of the best things I'd ever seen. Obviously, once the dust had settled a little bit, there were questions being asked around, well, who was funding what? Now, I'm going to make put an addendum onto this, in that the messaging that came out of WiseNet was not particularly helpful to this. And I know that Cedric, when I spoke to him, openly said this at the time as well. So they recognise this. I think Sony sent out some mixed messaging, and then it sort of spiraled into this wave of misinformation. So the media were going around and basically saying that Sony would be putting in a significant amount of money into the development of Shenmue 3, and that the Kickstarter was essentially a drop in the ocean and a bit of a con, is what they were running with. So they were basically going around and saying, well, they've put SUZUKI on the Kickstarter stage, Sony are funding this development. And it wasn't denied outright by WiseNet, which didn't help. And there is an article out there that WiseNet sort of shut everything down around questions around that, which wasn't helpful, honestly. But at the same respect, I think there's a little bit of blame on Sony in that they took time to get themselves up to speed with what was going on. And when we were asked, "Are you helping with Shenmue 3?" they said, "Oh yeah, of course we are. We're supporting Shenmue 3." And that was taken as, well, they're putting money into the budget, they're developing it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You've got, if you're just going off the headline there, that Polygon have used Sony contributing to Shenmue 3 development. Just the word contributing, it sounds like an exchange of money, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like they're putting in a significant amount of money into the budget. And Kotaku did the same thing. Sony's helping make Shenmue 3. Yeah, those are the headlines that are up in lights. So instantly, before you read it, you think Sony are helping with the development of this project. Whereas in reality, this was only a marketing deal and some financial support to get the game over onto PlayStation through their third-party team. The problem was that this had spiraled by the time that Adam Boyes did an interview with Giant Bomb, and he talked about the marketing deal and the project and the promotion and what it was. But he stressed at this point that WiseNet was self-publishing this title. So Sony weren't putting anything into the development side of things. They were literally supporting the marketing. They're supporting to get it over on third party. But the problem was that this had spiraled immediately, and it gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And it had tarnished the Kickstarter, I think, from the public view. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are, James, on that.
Well, WiseNet and Awesome Japan or whoever should have been, or even Sony, pumping out the correct information out there to make sure that everyone knows the current situation. I mean, they should have thought, even back in when they were showcasing the game on E3 stage, that Adam Boyes says we're excited to be sharing this as part of on our stage. You've got two sort of things there. He's sort of saying we're not really involved, we're just showing it on our stage, but then at the same time he's saying that we are involved because it's on our stage. There's some sort of exclusivity deal been written for the game to even be shown on Sony's stage. And as far as marketing goes at that point, I don't know how much that was the showing of it on the E3 stage, because they know they're going to get millions of eyes viewing this trailer, especially in the lineup that you had the Last Guardian, the Final Fantasy 7 remake or whatever, and then Shenmue 3. People that didn't even know anything about Shenmue, they were still calling it the holy trinity of E3 press conferences. So the fact that happened on that stage at that time, it marketed itself at that point, and you've got people, and possibly a lot of these ended up being the people that sort of tarnished the Kickstarter a little bit, because perhaps they weren't really a diehard fan like we were at the time. We've been waiting so long, maybe just people hopped on because of the hype surrounding the game. And so 5 years down the line, they're still waiting for the product. They're seeing trailers that they're thinking of, like, that we're going to get into it a little bit, but they're seeing like the Dead Eye trailer, which was in development, and thinking, oh my God, this is what I paid 60 quid for, or whatever.
Yeah.
And, because they're not diehard fans and they're not really looking into the evidence and they're not really looking into the facts or reading that it says this is a development, it's not a final release trailer or whatever. That kind of tarnished it a little bit, because those sort of people were then turning around and leaving all these negative comments on the Kickstarter, and media outlets were running with some of those themselves, kind of thing as well. So I just think, I don't know if that is true, that perhaps just by showing the game at E3 was part of the marketing deal. that they were invested in, or they were going to do something further down the line. I can't really recall what they did do further down the line, apart from perhaps putting it on the PlayStation Store. Maybe there was a "this game's out today" in the. I can't remember, like 3 years ago on the Sony dashboard, the PlayStation 4 dashboard, whether Shenmue 3 got a bit of a bump somewhere when it was released. I can't remember.
I can't remember. I mean, I think also the terms of that deal changed when they got a publisher in Deep Silver, but that's a whole different discussion point, which we I think we covered previously. I think the biggest thing with this, and I'm just going to call it as I see it, is people jumped to conclusions with zero, and I mean zero evidence. Where was the evidence that Sony were funding this? Where was it? I know the messaging was mixed, and I get there needed to be some people need to be inquisitive around this thing because that's their job. Fine, I understand that, I get that, and I know the messaging was poor, but conclusions were jumped to. So by the time we got to Tokyo Game Show 2015, where Cedric had turned around and said, Shibuya were the largest external funding source on Shenmue 3 at that time. So sum up the Shenmue 3 budget right now, right? We know it was $20 million. Yu Suzuki said that publicly, right? There was, after the Sakabaka, there was like just short of $7.2 million in there.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's essentially $12.8 million unaccounted for in inverted commas. We know that Deep Silver put a sum of money into that. I don't know how much. I've heard $5 million pushed around. I've heard $10 million pushed around. Call it 10 just for argument's sake, right? So there's a $3-ish million gap. Well, if Shibuya then are the largest people coming in on it after that sum, Sony's sum was nominal. At best, it wasn't very much. So,
and you've got to, we broke it down before, but even the Kickstarter budget, you're seeing 6.7 million or whatever, or 7 overall with the Sakabaka, and 25% of that gets lost instantly to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
You've got all the shipping fees and the reward fees involved, which I'm sure must have accounted for, honestly, about half of the budget, just because how many backers there were. There was 63,000 backers. So I think we did the math somewhere. I don't know if we've done it on a podcast before, but say if the average postage, and bearing in mind that a lot of the items they actually shipped individually when they were ready. So I must have had maybe at least 3 individual things shipped to me. So however much it costs from Japan to the UK postage for like some fairly large items, considering, say 63,000 on average of maybe, I know a lot of that is digital, so it's hard to say as well, but I was going to say £10 per person. That's 630,000 just on shipping fees.
Yeah, and you're probably being conservative, I think, with that as well, because obviously it goes all over the world. I think just bringing it back, I think, to the main point here in terms of what the media was saying and made that assumption that Sony were funding this. We also have to bear in mind that when all this information came out from Cedric, when Sony turned around and said, no, it's marketing and a bit of financial support, but not very much, basically third party, and when WiseNet also put their own statements out, where were the retractions? There were none.
Well, there were none because obviously the story was done when they first announced it. Do you know what I mean? These media outlets, they're not going to come back with a rebuttal and say, oh, sorry guys, we were wrong. Or
what irks me with this particular thing is, it's had a massive impact on the Kickstarter. I mean, Cedric said that.
Cedric was saying to you that he expected that project to get to 10 mil, and he thinks that because of the media outlash at the start, and obviously he also agreed that their communication was poor as well.
Yeah, he did.
WiseNet's Awesome Japan, the Kickstarter should have been well versed in communicating the facts across ASAP. I mean, we noticed when we went through the Kickstarter page, right at the very bottom, I don't know if they added it.
Yeah, they did. It wasn't there originally.
But it wasn't there originally, and it was right at the bottom. A little bit of tidbit about the actual funding or whatever, marketing, Sony's involvement or whatever, because we were surprised when we read that towards the bottom of the page, and no one realistically is going to get down there to see that to then make their own judgment.
No.
They're just going with the easy clickbait headline that's out there that's saying Sony's involved, this is involved, Yu Suzuki's, he doesn't need Kickstarter to fund this game. He's already got it funded. He's just greedy, getting money from as many sources as he can. He's bleeding the fans dry,
Yeah.
which were some of the things that were being thrown around at the time.
And it's shocking. Bleeding the fans dry. I'm sorry. With all due respect to people out there, we're a community who've been fighting for this game for 15 years. We are there to support this franchise. We're not being bled dry. We know what we're walking into. We knew what we were walking into when that Kickstarter came out. And I just think it really hurt the wider perception of Shenmue 3 and the Kickstarter and the project and everything else that went around it. And it's rather unfortunate because it did, I think, in my view, I'm not necessarily saying it got to 10 million, but I do think it could have possibly fetched 8, for example, which it sounds silly, but if you have another 2 or 3 million quid, do we get the ending that was originally planned? Do we get more character development? It sounds really silly looking at it from that point of view now, but that could have been a difference. We don't know, but it's unfortunate. It is what it is. We can't change it. But the fact remains that this was a marketing deal with some financial support for third party. That was it. Nothing more, nothing less. And I suspect, if anything, like I said, Deep Silver came on, and I reckon Sony probably stepped away from that.
Which, is a good point in itself. We don't actually know what deal Deep Silver made, and
No.
we were under the assumption that they were going to be within that deal, might be the Shenmue 4, Shenmue 5, or whatever to complete the series. And then after your conversation with Cedric, it doesn't really feel like that's the case, and we don't know if there's been falling out with Deep Silver or they weren't impressed by the sales figures. I mean, they have come out, THQ were saying that they were quite happy with the sales figures, so whether they're just saying that or they actually were but they're not willing to invest more, it's hard to judge at this point until we actually know what's going on there. We don't want to make our own assumptions either. But I like you say, there seemed to be a slight change in tone as soon as Deep Silver involved. And I know we did get a few game delays, but ultimately the game was still rushed, out because we got Baishikut or whatever. So, like you say, if there was a more of a positive view on the game at the start of the Kickstarter and until it ended 30 days later or whatever, and we did get maybe 8 million or 10 million, I'm not quite sure what would have happened to that money, whether it would have brought on more staff to make the game quicker or it would have made the game on a much more bigger scope than we got, and it may have took even longer to come out. I don't. It's hard to judge with the money wise whether it would have made the game harder to make or easy to make, because there's a certain point there he was looking for 2 million, and he was going to make like a sort of a more story generated basic game, and then at 10 million he actually came out. He said that at 10 million we'd be able to make the Shenmue that everyone wants, and obviously we kind of got sort of a 7 million, wasn't quite 10, wasn't quite, so it was in the middle of the two figures. So what we did get was him trying to push towards the Shenmue 3 that we wanted, but falling short. So whether or not if we'd had got the 10 million, there would have been something in that 3 million that would have pushed it over the edge, like he was, or it just would have even made it even harder to make. I don't know.
It could have made,
it's a difficult one to say.
In my mind, it could have made the difference. We don't know whether it would have made the difference, but it's a lot of money.
And we'll never know.
And we'll never know. You're quite right.
Yep.
But we'll leave that one there, I think, because we could rant around it all day.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that is the one that was like, everyone knows about that. There was a lot of grumblings of Sony's involvement early on, and hopefully we've given the facts there. We haven't actually said what WiseNet said. Do we know?
There is a statement they released, and I'm sure we can link it in the video for everyone because it's quite a long statement. But they basically,
so if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put up the article or whatever.
But they basically clarify what the arrangements were, and it was late in coming, honestly, but they did clarify it. But unfortunately, the damage had already been done. But there we go. So we move into the next point around the media. This was just after actually the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter. It was just as the PayPal had opened or was about to open. And the media were going around and saying that basically Yu Suzuki needs more money, implying that Shenmue 3 won't be realised without it. And they all surfaced on the same sort of time frame, around October 5th. There was a Eurogamer article, which is a bit clickbaity, but the actual article itself is really good. It says, SUZUKI could do with more money. That's your example of clickbait if I've ever seen one. But Eurogamer generally are quite sympathetic towards
Positive,
Shenmue. They quite positive towards it. So for them to make a clickbait article, it was like, what? But actually, the content of the article is excellent. I'd urge anybody to read it because it goes into a lot of the detail around the Kickstarter and why more funding is being sought. But then I'm going to flip that to a Games Radar article, if I may. And this, I've taken a little extract from it. It says, Shenmue 3, most funded game on Kickstarter, would like more money, please. Shenmue 3 is aiming for a holiday 2017 release date. Well, we know that didn't happen. Hopefully that's enough time to implement some better ragdoll physics and avoid the Shenmue crowdfunding campaign 3 to be announced at E3 2016. Come on.
Oh my god,
I'm sorry, but
that's a bit harsh, isn't it?
But
because we've already got the campaign, so they just, if you notice as well, it is kind of that Chinese whisper thing going on there. So Eurogamer and GameSpot, they've both put out a similar article there. SUZUKI could do with a little bit more money. So they're sort of stirring what SUZUKI must have said in an interview where he's like, it probably was that one where he said like at 10 million, we'd be able to do the Shenmue 3. And perhaps at that time they'd opened up the PayPal Slacker backer that would allow for that to maybe happen. And then these articles go live, and people that may have been interested in backing via PayPal rather than Kickstarter are then immediately put off from doing that because it's like, well, how much money do we actually need to get this game made? Is that, there's a risk involved because of these headlines where there might be a point where he still needs more money. This game isn't going to get made. I'm not going to invest £60 or $60 or whatever of my money into a game that doesn't feel as though it's certain about where it wants to be. And I think that was the problem.
Yeah, you summed that up really, really well, actually, in terms of what the feeling around that was. And the picture it portrayed. Oh, yeah, if we don't put more money in, it won't happen. Shenmue 3, but it won't be the game that you want, or it may not even happen, and your money will disappear into a black abyss. Whereas in reality, if you go back to the actual Kickstarter campaign, there was so many people going, can I back through PayPal? Can I back through PayPal? It was really demanded to the point where on the final Twitch stream, with the Kickstarter just about to finish in the final hours, they announced on that Twitch stream that they would be opening up at some point that year PayPal due to fan demand. It
took a while, actually, didn't it? I feel like it took a while from the Kickstarter ending to the...
It did, because the Kickstarter ended in July, and it was September, October time that the Slacker backer opened up. And this is
so it wasn't like it was like pre-planned and they were ready to launch to make more money.
No,
it was like we can't deny all these people want to pay. And I remember at the time a lot of Japanese fans were like struggling to use Kickstarter. They had to go through friends that maybe had the thing translated into English so they knew where they were putting stuff. So there was a lot of like, considering the game is being made in Japan, it's from a Japanese developer rather. It's it's a game that meant a lot to Japanese fans as well, and then they're using the sort of American service of Kickstarter. So yeah, there's going to be people looking for different ways to pay for something that they want, which is where the PayPal Slacker backer thing came into it. And even the word Slacker backer, which is a term that people already knew and were familiar with, but again, that Slacker backer thing seemed a bit like a negative in itself, that like, yeah, you're slacking on backing.
Yeah,
is the shit that you get, sort of thing. It wasn't the case.
I mean, that feeds into the next bit, which we'll come into. But I think,
yeah.
Again, you're right. This was a fan demanded thing. I know, and Yu Suzuki's been quite open in saying that he could have done, could do with some more money for the game because he wants to make it as good as possible. He's never been a person to compromise, and he's working within a budget he's probably not used to. So having a bit more money is going to help him make a better game. We know that.
And the thing is, it's daft, but all this spirals out of probably one interviewer just saying to him, like, are you satisfied with what you got? Would you have liked to have got more money or whatever? And then that instantly becomes this ulterior motive that Yu Suzuki's demanding more money, where in actual fact, he's obviously going to say he would have liked more money because, why wouldn't you?
No, I know.
You're going to make a better product.
Again, yeah, people accusing him of being greedy, etc. But I go back to my original point that this Slacker backer, this PayPal thing, was through fan demand. People who wanted to back the Kickstarter who couldn't said, "Can I back through PayPal?" People were demanding it, and they went with it. And it stayed open for what, nearly 3 years. It stayed open for, didn't it? It was around 2018.
Really?
They
Was it
shut
that
it.
long?
It was
Yeah.
quite a long time. So people kept contributing to it because they wanted to. They weren't
Yeah.
forced to. They knew what they were getting into, and they got the product at the end of it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, myself, I think I probably did another £200 through the Slacker backer because I got another T-shirt. Because at the time I was thinking, and it allowed you to do these sort of things
Yeah.
because it wasn't all your money in one spunk at, within that Kickstarter thing. It was like, okay, a year's passed. I've got a medium T-shirt booked on Kickstarter. I might just get a large just in case, and then I can work out which is the perfect
Yeah.
size that I want to wear then as out of the T-shirts. And then obviously it came to light that there was going to be a Slacker backer case for the game. So it was like, okay, well, I'm a collector. I want to get that. So I'll buy the Slacker backer version of the PS4 physical and maybe the Slacker backer version of the PC thing. And I don't think they were intending to fleece us by saying like, okay, the big fans are going to get 4 copies of the game to have each variation of the case or whatever. It's just giving options for all, like you say, all the comments, and people were saying like, I want this, I want that, can you, on the PayPal, can you do this? Can you, even much so that it caused a bit of a stir with the poll. I don't know if that's one of your things later, but there was a poll.
It
It
is
says,
actually.
okay, I'll wait then.
You've actually segued into that quite nicely. In fact,
I
James,
didn't mean to, but
I
yeah.
like that. No, you've segued into that really well. So point 3 that we're making right now is a natural sort of progression on. It's about the Slacker backer campaign. Actually, as we know, it opened up, and there was a bit of toing and froing about it. But the media started running around and saying that Slacker backers were not going to get any rewards. Now, the reason for this is there was a poll that went out asking the Kickstarter backers if they would be happy for the Kickstarter exclusive rewards to be made available to the PayPal Slacker backers.
Yeah.
Breakdown came to about, it was 30.9% in favour of doing it. 26.5% said they should stay exclusive. 42.6% said whatever, don't really care.
Yeah. So you add that and you add the other one together equals more in favour.
Yeah. So
essentially,
what wasn't said, and this comes down to communication again, so I'm going to pick this up because we're trying to be balanced about this, is that they didn't say it was the additional Kickstarter exclusive rewards like the Dice Do capsule, and I think possibly the Corey message might have been in here as well, but they didn't make that clear, which, as we found out with the Kickstarter, is a big no-no. So what ended up happening is there was a article that popped out. I'm just going to pop it up on my screen now.
While you're doing that, do you remember if the telephone card, the international phone card, was Slacker or not?
I don't know without looking. Is my honest answer. Quite frankly, I'd have to.
I can't remember personally, but I feel like that was a Kickstarter exclusive as well. So
this is a Polygon article, and I've pulled a quote from this because I think it's quite powerful. And we've mentioned Polygon a few times. It sounds like we're picking on them, but we're not. It's just I think summed
what
everything.
They reported at the time. Yeah,
it summed my point up best. It says the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter campaign offers a plethora of exclusive rewards contributing from physical copies of the game and unique cases, especially engraved plaques. None of these gifts, however, will be available to those who donated via PayPal, according to the campaign's latest update. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to turn around and say it's bullshit.
Yeah, it sounds like the WiseNet just taking a big dump on everyone that missed out on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's like, ha, you've missed out. Nope, You're not getting anything. Whereas in reality, it was only down to the additional Kickstarter exclusive rewards, which was what the poll's talking about. But it comes down to mixed messaging. They didn't make this clear. I've made that point, but they've literally turned around. They could have gone on the bloody Slacker backer page and looked at it.
Yeah.
And gone, oh, they are getting some, but they're not getting X, Y, and Z. No, they ran with that.
See, that's the problem again. Is that just the bad communication? If you actually read what it says, considering the strong response from those of you that felt the exclusive rewards should remain exclusive for Kickstarter, those exclusive rewards will not be made available on the PayPal page as originally promised. So, I mean, the media, I'm sure when they're writing these articles, they must have done the research. They must have looked at the Kickstarter rewards and said, oh yeah, okay. But they've just twisted the words then to generate the clickbait article, perhaps.
I don't know with this particular one because it's very unequivocal in the way they've worded that. It's very definite that it isn't happening. Whereas I think it has come from a poor message coming out from the communication side around the Kickstarter, Wisenet, Awesome Japan. The messaging wasn't great, but they have made an assumption. If they'd have gone on that page, they would have seen the rewards, most of which were from the Kickstarter. I mean, blooming heck, you got a different Slacker t-shirt for backing through the Slacker backer to the Kickstarter.
So you actually got exclusive Slacker backer rewards.
Exclusive stuff.
So yeah, so it's not like you're not getting anything at all. You're just donating 60 quid and there's your money gone.
Yeah.
Which is what that sounded like. It sounded like you're not getting any rewards. Whereas you're actually getting Kickstarter rewards, just not the exclusive ones, like, stuff that has already been and gone. Perhaps the character busts. Obviously, they can't do stuff like that. They can't do the merchandise bags and stuff like that because all that's assigned to people.
Yeah, correct.
And then there is like really exclusive things. I don't know if they were in the Kickstarter and the Slackerbacker, like get your picture in the harbour capsule toy stuff. I don't think they were they?
Not from memory, but I think the point remains that A, the communication wasn't great, but B, that the Osaka's actually got some of their own unique stuff, and they got the vast majority of what the Kickstarter rewards would have been. So to jump to a conclusion that they're getting nothing without even going, from what it looks like, without even going on the page, I think is purely wrong. If I did that in my job, I'd get sacked.
Well, basically, yeah, because you're reporting the wrong thing, aren't you?
Exactly. So that irks me. You can probably tell from the way I'm talking that it irks me. But it's another piece of bad press. Not completely the fault of the media, because Wisenet's mixed messaging, etc., from everybody else, but really just a 5-minute click and you'd see what was actually going on. I mean, Wisenet issued a statement to say what was happening and it cleared it up pretty quickly. And I do think some sites even offered retractions to it, which is great, and fair play to those sites that held their hands up.
I think that's the problem as well. You've got a lot of these websites just copying off one another rather than, so they haven't actually done the research themselves.
No.
They've seen another media outlet say these rewards aren't being offered, and perhaps they're not completely familiar with Shenmue themselves. They're more interested in other games that are coming out, and there must be a lot of like different news concerning different games every day. It's not just a Shenmue centered outbreak of news. So when perhaps they don't really investigate, they just try and report on as much stuff as they can. They end up copying and pasting one another, don't they, really?
They do a bit. I mean, we've had it on our site, haven't we? When we've broken news, I mean, IGN and people like that have come from, taken it from us and ran with it. And so it does happen. I mean, that's fine. It does happen. But I just think, take a bit of time and just be sure. And then this sort of stuff doesn't happen. But it's quite clickbaity, isn't it? In that respect, you're not getting anything. Paperbacks get nothing.
Well, I've just had a look just on the Slackerbacker, and okay, so all of those Kickstarter exclusive things that you would have expected, like your photo and the thing, or you get your picture on a capsule toy, or write your message in the $600, put your name and 104 character message in the guest speaker Jobo in. So they've got those sort of things in there, but the ones that were like exclusive and limited to Kickstarter, they didn't make it across to the Slackerbacker, and that is obvious, really, at the end of the day, because they were limited tiers, and those are the things that they said in that one particular update they wouldn't be putting into the Slackerbacker because of the people that have actually invested into those tiers on Kickstarter feel like the overall majority they said didn't want to see anyone willy-nilly, because perhaps you've got to think about, I know obviously from a Shenmue fan's point of view, we want as much money to go into the series to get the best game experience, but at the same time you can kind of understand people saying like, well, I've spent $5,000 to get this particular tier, or £1,000 to get this particular tier that was hard for me to do. I thought I was limited to 30 days and I've, maybe racked up credit cards and all this sort of stuff. I don't know, you know what I mean? And then to find out that there's 3 years where you can get those rewards, and it doesn't feel as exclusive anymore, those particular things. But obviously the physical items, they're all on the Sakabaka because no one's arguing stuff like that. People were just, which is the whole basis behind the poll. Why isn't that sent out a poll? Because they didn't want to just jump to conclusions. They didn't want to just jump and create something and then piss people off. They wanted to actively engage with the community, asking, should we do this? Would this be okay? Is this something you want to see? And most people turned around and said, well, not really, because we thought that we'd already invested that towards the Kickstarter and we're happy to see the Sakabaka. It's making me sad. I'm talking on behalf of everyone, but this is kind of like how the turn of events occurred, where we're happy to see the Slackerbacker, but we're not happy for certain rewards to be just available to anyone willy-nilly. And then obviously that turns into clickbait that we're kind of debating about right now, which is unfortunate again, because again, it's not necessarily another nail in the coffin, because obviously what we did get was amazing in the end, but it is another nail in certain people's views that Shenmue 3 is an uninvestable purchase for them. I'm seeing too many negative headlines. It feels dodgy. Something feels dodgy about this. They're not doing the research, they're just reading the headlines. Something's definitely off about this. I'm not going to go into it.
Yeah, exactly that. And again, we don't know how much damage that may or may not have done, but it's another bit of PR that you don't want. And unfortunately, it's been and gone.
So we're going to have a quick music break now before we move into the next points. So Matt, you've picked a piece of Shenmue 3 music to give us a little break with. What have you chosen?
So my first pick is Pastoral Village. It's a nice little calming piece from Shenmue 3 in Bailu Village.
Welcome back. That was Pastoral Village from Shenmue 3's soundtrack. So moving on, Matt, you're about to talk about the next point, which is the 2017 trailer reaction.
Yes, you stopped me going on a rant. I think that's probably, I think the listeners will probably appreciate that, to be fair. Right, so...
Too much intake of data and stuff.
Yeah.
You needed that little bit of music break.
Yeah, I think everybody did for their own sanity more than anything else. So we got the 2017 trailer. We know what it looked like in terms of the environments were beautiful, absolutely stunning, really impressive. Obviously, the character models didn't have any expressions in them. It was obvious, wasn't it? Let's not beat around the bush about it. It was obvious. But the media sort of ran around and started saying, bearing in mind at this point, I think Shenmue 3 had just had its delay into 2018. So it wasn't going to be 2017. This has been delayed. So it was nowhere near the finished product. And some of the media are running around going, Shenmue 3's trailer is real bad. Kotaku, Australia. They say there's a good reason for it being delayed by almost a year. The trailer looks like arse.
So it's horrible, isn't it?
Horrible.
To say that, even not alone the people that are meant to be reading it or the fans reading it, but just to say that is horrible.
And then US Gamer, another one, it turned around and said in the trailer, series hero Rio, his friends and his enemies are stiffer faced than Barbie dolls. As viewers turned away in mild shock and confusion, game director Yu Suzuki assured the world Shenmue 3 characters will emote in the final build. I mean,
mannequin-like faces.
Yeah, Polygon. Polygon actually, in fairness, here weren't too bad about it. They said reaction to Shenmue 3's mannequin-like faces prompted a response from Yu Suzuki. He told GameWatch that facial expression has been removed from some of the footage, but would eventually be replaced. That I don't have a problem with.
No, because they are giving it how it is. That's the whole problem with the Kickstarter. Really, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot really with the Kickstarter, because they're dedicated to the people that have backed it to show them something, and you've got people constantly harassing them every day.
Yeah.
When are we getting an update?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see an update. So you've got people like that are asking for updates. So when they do provide the updates, because it's an unfinished product, it is going to look not up to standard because it's unfinished, basically, which is what Suzuki was trying to say there. The facial animations, even the character models at that point weren't the final character models that we were going to get. So it's hard to judge something based off that, and then for those things to be the specific things that people hone into, facial animations, the character models and whatever. Again, at the same time, I can understand because that is what they're being shown, but they need to understand the context behind that. This is a development piece of footage that you wouldn't typically see. You're only seeing it because it is through Kickstarter.
Exactly.
And they've got a sort of a responsibility to be sharing the sort of because that's what they promised.
Yeah, I don't know what went on behind the scenes with this trailer in terms of why it was put out there. If you watch the trailer to the end, Shibuya Productions logo isn't on there, and I suspect there was a disagreement between people back behind the scenes as to whether they should even pull that trailer in the format that it was, because it was obviously on the PlayStation, YouTube, etc. But I think my biggest takeaway from this is you've got industry journalists who obviously preview a lot of games. They've been around, they preview a lot of games. So they will be used to seeing alpha footage or production footage, pre-production footage, whatever you want to call it. Yet they're acting shocked at this. Now, again, there's a common theme here that I'm revisiting: communication. It wasn't made clear, and probably should have been bookended in a proper big update, press release, etc. This trailer is an alpha phase trailer, but we, as a respect to the Kickstarter backers, we're going to show off what we've got so far. The product isn't final, even though I think it probably said it on the trailer somewhere. But the product isn't final; it is alpha phase. We're just showing this because we'd like to give people a preview into what's going on. And then I think you probably calm some of that negative press. But at the same time, you've got experienced people in the gaming journalism going, well, this looks shit. Well, of course it looks shit because it's alpha, but you fail to say that. You're acting surprised. Why? Why are you acting surprised? What's the motive there other than clickbait?
It is a good point. Like you say, they're used to seeing games go through these development states, and they're picking on Shenmue 3 for some reason, again, just because it's an easy target at this point. Maybe it's slightly different in this situation because the footage of Shenmue 3 is out there in the public eye. It's on the PlayStation YouTube. We can all, laugh, and people that didn't back the game can have a laugh about it as well because, oh my god, what's this trailer of this game called Shenmue 3? It looks awful. It looks bad. And the media are picking up on that and running with that as like an easy click to their website. And then, it's up to the fans really to go out of the way to kind of like counter argue that, of course, it's in this state now because of where we are. We're still a year or two away from anywhere remotely being a finished product.
Yeah, exactly. And the overreaction, it doesn't make sense for people who are probably used to seeing this sort of thing. They're probably not used to seeing it in the public eye. So I can understand that your average person who, your average gamer who's not a Shenmue fan will see that and go, what the hell's this? I understand that. I get that. And the messaging needs to be clearer around why that was out there. But the journalism around it didn't help.
Do you think then that by these trailers being out on the official PlayStation channels, was that part of Sony's marketing deal? Is that something that needed to happen, really, if you think about it? Because obviously we got more negativity out of that. I mean, it was good for the Shenmue fans to see these trailers and be able to share them, but realistically, because they looked unfinished, should they have been released on? Should someone have said, perhaps we shouldn't release them here, let's just leave it as a Kickstarter update?
And I don't want to, I don't want to talk for Cedric because I'm sure he can make the point himself. But I think it's telling that Shibuya logo wasn't on there. I think it's telling. So, I mean, I do think you're right. I think it's part of the PlayStation deal. I mean, it's got 1 million hits on YouTube, probably more than that now. But your most hit trailer is also the one that got the most scrutiny in terms of the presentation of the characters that were in alpha phase. And I just think, it's an overreaction, but also I think had the messaging been better around it, it may have avoided that, or they could have held off a little bit. But I think they also felt they had to show something.
And it's a shame when you think of it like that is possibly the most watched trailer. Whether it is because of the clickbait, it's like it's generated views because of that. But if anyone is looking to pick up the game today and they go on YouTube and search for Shenmue 3 trailer, and then that's because it's the most viewed, perhaps it's like the first one they see recommended, and then instantly that's a turn off straight away, which is unfortunate itself, I suppose.
It is, and I do think, I mean, it is an easy target, Shenmue in general, for these sorts of things. But again, it's like I said earlier, it's a common theme: overreaction, poor communication, and as we said previously, Cedric has been quite open and honest about that all the way through, and fair play to him for sort of taking that quite reflective approach to it, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think about what we've just covered so far, you've got everything's a communication issue, I suppose. And you've got the Sony's putting up the bill for Shenmue 3. Wrong. It's just a marketing deal. You hear that a little bit too late.
Yeah.
SUZUKI needs more money. Wrong. He's just replying to a question and it's blown out of proportion. Slacker backers aren't getting rewards. Wrong. They are getting rewards. They're just not getting exactly the identical Kickstarter ones because they were exclusive to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
They're still getting their own rewards. Again, blown out of proportion. People think this is just a scam. They're just looking for money, and no one's getting rewards when no one's saying they're not going to get any rewards. It's just crazy that a slight wording of something is so easy to take and mold into this negative press. What can Wisenet say? That that's probably why towards the tail end of the process of the game we weren't seeing any updates, because every time they put an update out it's actually doing more damage, because no matter how the wording stuff, even as they're typing it, it sounds correct. Reading it back now, it sounds correct. They're not saying that they're not getting any rewards or whatever, but it must have been so difficult on the Wisenet team and these people involved with creating these updates, because they know that as soon as they hit that publish button on that update, someone is going to tear that shit apart and try and create something that isn't there. So it must have been so hard to even know how to word an update. Because
what do you say? I mean, at the end of the day, communication issues or not, it doesn't justify the plainly wrong stuff that had to this point gone round. It just doesn't, straight up. So on that little rant again, turning into a lot of me ranting and losing. No, I'm not losing my shit, but yeah. We come on to, I would say, probably arguably the most controversial thing with the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter campaign, launch, release, etc., is the Epic Games exclusivity. Now, as we know, this was a publisher decision to go over to Epic. and it caused a hell of a ruckus. Let's not beat around the bush about it.
So it was announced, wasn't it, at the PC gaming show?
Yeah, at E3 that year,
Yeah,
2019.
which was unusual. I
Yeah,
forget what was happening. I feel like we were watching it,
we
and we have some sort of we knew it was going to happen.
Peter streamed it because Cedric had like tweeted like some teasy thing to watch it, basically.
The PC gaming show, yeah. So we knew it
Yeah.
was going to end up there, and obviously at that point we knew it was going to end up on PC, didn't we? Because, and that's another thing, is that's probably this particular point, right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
about to say? Okay.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're going to say
Okay.
in terms of the storefront.
So it wasn't unusual until this point. That's
No.
what I'm trying to say. It was going to
Yeah.
get shown on PC Gaming E3, and no fan questioned anything about that because we were like, yeah, okay, it's getting released on not only the PS4 but also on a PC platform.
Yeah, and the platform is the interesting point. So the media and YouTubers as well. I'm not going to name names, but if you've heard me rant before, you'll probably pick one out. They said Wisenet's getting all the money. It's a scam. That Steam was mentioned the entire way through the Kickstarter campaign, and also later on that not everybody gets a refund, which there's a caveat to that. So I'm going to quickly dispel one thing. Wisenet got all the money. No, that was a publisher decision to go over there. That was not a Wisenet decision, and none of the money, as Cedric has said repeatedly, he said it in March 2020, he said it to me in December 2020, that money was a publisher decision, did not go to the development of Shenmue 3.
So you're telling me that SUZUKI didn't get all of Epic's filthy money?
He got none of their filthy money.
Okay.
So there we go. The next point around Steam is the biggest one, I think, around this, in my view. If you remember back to the Kickstarter campaign, in 2015, it was always listed as Windows PC. Always. So you know, Tom, Dick, and Harry down the street who backed this Kickstarter for PC would have been under the assumption it was Steam. I openly admit it. I thought it would be going to Steam in 2015, but it wasn't concrete.
And I'd say the only reason for that is because Steam was the only platform at that particular moment. In 2015, Epic Games wasn't a thing, right?
No.
As far as I'm aware. It's not going to end up on bloody Ubisoft's launcher, Uplay or whatever. It's not going to end up on, you know what I mean? So the obvious thought in everyone's head was Steam, but the point that we're trying to make is they didn't say Steam anywhere on the Kickstarter page. When you were backing the PC version of the game, you were backing like you say, a Windows PC version of the game.
Yeah.
So it was
their assumption at the end of the day.
Assumed, yeah.
They assumed it would be Steam. I assumed it would be Steam. You assumed it would be Steam. But also, bear in mind at the time as well, there was people were talking about whether it would come on like Blu-rays or DVDs for PC. I mean, I know that physical drives are dead in PC these days, so they made the right call to do a key for it. But yeah, we didn't know how it was going to get delivered. We had no idea. It was assumed.
Well, you got different mindsets really from 2015 until release in 2019. You know, in that 4-year period. What I'm trying to say is, like in 2015, perhaps it is possible in your head that Shenmue 3 is going to come on a Blu-ray disc, but then come 2019, you know that isn't really a thing. Everything's a key.
Yeah,
you're going to get like a physical case with a key in for whatever game. You know what I'm trying to say there? Like there could be a different in period of time there because there's been a 4-year gap.
Yeah. Exactly that, and you know it does change. I mean, now if you buy a PC game physical, it is just a key on a disc. Now, I can understand that Kickstarter backers who back the physical PC version were a little bit upset by that being just a key, an Epic key. I think they could have been, as a gesture of goodwill, maybe put some unique artwork on there or something like that to make it more viable to those Kickstarter backers who did go down that route.
Because it was a disc.
Yeah, it was a disc. I've got, it's in my shelf.
Yeah.
But the real kicker with this was there was a lot of media articles and a lot of YouTubers running around and saying that Steam was mentioned in the original Kickstarter campaign. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And I'm referencing Spags here. I'm also referencing James Hamill from the article he wrote for Megavisions at the time.
You can actually even just go on the Kickstarter page,
Yeah.
and it doesn't say Steam anywhere.
No, it doesn't.
So,
If you just Wayback Machine or whatever, there's no mention
yeah.
of it. And the first mention of Steam, the first mention of it was late June 2018, right? So that's when the backer surveys opened. And the Steam page for Shenmue 3 only appeared in October 2018. So again, you're looking at when people could, I think, be justifiably annoyed by it. Bearing in mind, I don't care about a launcher. It was a bloody launcher. Get over it.
Well, what is it? It's a three-year difference then.
Yeah.
So there's a 30-day period to back a product.
Yep.
Everyone's backed PC, for example, or
Yeah.
these people that backed PC. 3 years have passed, and then they've been given a survey that says, "Do you want it on Steam?"
Correct.
So 3 years ago, they just assumed they were getting a Steam product.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there is, but in the same sentence, you could justify someone turning around and saying, "Steam, I don't want it on Steam. I was backing a PC version."
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, no, it's a valid point. And actually, going back to this whole fury around Epic and the way they are and their store and the launcher and everything, I'm old enough to remember that same issue with Steam back in the day when Steam put Half-Life and you had to have it linked to the Steam store. And I remember the shitstorm around that. And it was exactly the same with Epic. It comes and it goes, it's cyclical, and then people accept it.
And I would say today, people have already accepted Epic now.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone complaining about Epic.
Well,
I see games going first on Epic. That might just be me. Your laugh says otherwise.
yeah.
There, but I'm seeing free games pop up. I'm lapping up all the free games. I'm not, maybe, like I say again, it might be where I put my eyes on the internet. I don't see anyone kicking off about Epic for exclusivity, and at least to the same sort of extent that they did lynching Shenmue 3.
Exactly that. It's nowhere near the extent it was around Shenmue 3. I mean, it's the timing of it is unfortunate in that Epic was the hot topic at the time. A lot of games were going over there. It was causing a bit of a stir. So Shenmue 3 got a pasting for it. But I just bring it back to the initial point around Steam, that you didn't know it was Steam until June 2018, possibly October 2018, but say for argument's sake, June 2018. So people who backed that on the Slacker, and I don't know what the numbers are because I haven't had a chance to go way back and add it up, but in terms of the 80,000 people end up putting money into this, or 80,000 backers, whatever you want to call them, it would have been a very small handful, very small proportion of people who could justifiably turn around and go, I was promised Steam. The rest, no, you haven't got an argument for it, in my book.
And because of that outcry, Wisenet turned around and offered refunds.
Wow, yes,
so,
eventually.
You know what I mean? It's, well, even eventually, it's still a kind gesture that, I don't know, did anyone report on that particular instance in a positive light? Or was it just like they've had to do it?
It was twisted, I think, is the way.
Twisted again.
It was twisted. So, and again, I'm coming back to a common theme here. The communication around this was not good because they initially came out quite solidly and said, you're not getting anything. Now, they, with all due respect, should have known the reaction. I mean, apparently SUZUKI's quote is going, everybody's going to be really upset by this after the announcement. So if he's aware of it, you'd have thought, the people in PR and marketing would know what the hell was going on.
I wonder if Yu Suzuki was on board with the Epic deal. I mean, I know you said that Yu Suzuki didn't get any of the money. It was like all of a publisher deal. Deep Silver have had some sort of an exchange with Epic Game Store to get exclusivity there. They see that as a benefit. Maybe Yu Suzuki gets a cut of the profits from the Epic Store. Maybe they've talked to Yu Suzuki and said, look, this is a great deal. You're going to get an exclusivity deal with Epic Games, this big gaming company. Perhaps Yu Suzuki's not fully aware of, I don't know. And then they're saying, and still a year later it's going to get released on Steam. So you're covering 2 platforms there. You're getting your PlayStation platform as well. You're covering 3 things there. You're getting 3 massive platforms for Shenmue 3. Deep Silver could have worded it that it sounded like amazing. Yu Suzuki goes up on stage, he's announcing Shenmue 3 is coming to Epic as a thingy. Or do you think he was already against it at that point?
I don't want to speak for him, but I get the sincere impression that I think he was dead set against the Epic thing. Having heard what he apparently said backstage, I think there was a concern around it, and a justifiable concern in terms of the reaction that we got.
So do you think in the end there was too many people with, toes in the Shenmue 3 basket? I don't even know what phrases I'm trying to say there, but there's too many eggs all after this profit, and it was split so much that in the end it kind of became a bit of a fiasco.
At the end of the day, it's a business. It is a business. From a business point of view, the publisher going to Epic made perfect sense because Epic were willing to put up a lot of money towards what their bottom line would be. So I get it.
So it made their original investment safer.
Yeah, exactly. Why, as a business, if someone goes, I'm going to give you a load of money to make your, essentially for nothing, to make your investment safe, why would you turn that down as a publisher?
So speaking out loud, because of that deal, Deep Silver, you could confirm that they had the biggest share in the product. You know how you were saying Shibuya Productions originally at some point had the biggest share. If they, I don't want to speak for Cedric either, but if they weren't, without Deep Silver, willing to do a deal like this, or that wasn't even on the cards, it's only because Deep Silver involved. But then someone's heading this decision, they've got to be the biggest shareholder to make that sort of decision, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite safe to assume that when Deep Silver come in, they put a substantial amount of money into Shenmue 3 and were probably the biggest stakeholder in that when they came in. So I understand and I get the decision from a business perspective. I really do. I just think that the reaction to it, I think, was predictable. The media were always going to jump on an Epic thing. It was always going to be. So I don't actually blame the media coverage for that point of it. I have an issue with the Steam thing, major issue with the Steam thing being reported as fact, whereas we know quite frankly it's not. It was June 2018. So there's that issue. And then we as you mentioned, refunds were put into place. So there was a lot of, I would say, passive aggressiveness around this in terms of the refunds. I mean, Polygon, here's the kicker though. Any and all refunds will come courtesy of Epic Games, not WiseNet or Shenmue 3's current publisher, Deep Silver. With all due respect, you're getting your refund. So what's the problem?
So do you think that was Epic's decision then?
Epic 100% stumped up and said, right, we will refund, because and Tim Sweeney tweeted out, I think there was a press statement that went out that said he didn't want to take any money away from WiseNet's development budget and that they would fund the refunds. I do not know how many were made. I have no idea. But Epic 100% fronted the money for that. And in terms of the reporting around it, they were saying that, obviously, trying and word myself carefully here, there was emails that went out, obviously, to allow people to change their game version from PC to PS4. And what some media outlets will go is not everybody gets a refund, because if you change from PC to PS4, you don't get your refund. Well,
that's obvious, really.
That's
isn't it?
pretty obvious, isn't it? Or it should be to people who have common sense, I think. And I'm pretty sure that there was some communication from WiseNet around that if you change it from PC to PS4, you're not going to get your refund because you've chosen, knowing the facts, to get a different version. Fine. And then there was also the whole thing around it taking up to nearly 3 months for the processes for the process to happen. So some reporting on it was quite fair. Actually, IGN turned around and said, right, it's open for 2 weeks. There was a bit of a question mark over that, but I actually think it ended up being open longer. And they were saying, well, actually, the Kickstarter campaign's over 4 years old, so payment processing's changed a lot. So we can understand why it could take that long. I mean, other places were going, allegedly, it could take up to 20 business days to 3 months when the game is out. and you only have 2 weeks to do it when the fitch is flipped off, and you'll never be able to do it again. You see the marked difference in the way that's being communicated.
Oh, yeah. And so how can you remember how long time frame? Because you said earlier that originally when they said they were going to get a refund, they'd only got like 2 weeks or something, and then it was called off. And it obviously they extended that, or
I mean,
that was never a two-week thing.
The communication that came out for the Kickstarter was 2 weeks. That was
2 weeks,
communicated,
right?
so that was accurate. But it stayed
Yep.
open longer. It definitely stayed open longer because a lot of people were on the Kickstarter comments saying, "Oh, I've missed the boat," or "This didn't happen. Could I get a refund?" And actually, why isn't it all Epic rather honoured those? I don't know. Again, I don't know how
Yeah.
many were, but
See, that's the thing, man. Really, at the end of the day, when you're looking at this now, the amount of stuff that Wisenet had to do, and perhaps it didn't look like this at the time, but this is a generous offer, really, isn't it? At the end of the day, people have paid £60. They're still getting a game.
yeah,
In fact, they even said that people that have backed on Epic are going to get a Steam code as well.
yeah. So you got 2 copies of the game.
You got 2 copies of the game for your original price. And if you weren't satisfied with your Epic thing, you could get a refund. So they're covering every base there, every option. So they know they've made perhaps not a mistake, but they've made a situation where they've put themselves in a position for media to scrutinize, for people to scrutinize. I mean, I know at the time people were saying like Epic's full of viruses
Yeah, and
and
spies on you and all of
Chinese
that.
companies trying to get data and stuff like that, which ended up not being the case, kind of thing. Or as far as I'm aware,
Yeah, that's right.
a lot of that was like misinformation in itself. But the people that viewed in those and the strong opinions of that thing taking place, they were offered a refund. So what is the problem? You can get your money back if you want. You could switch it to a PS4 version. I know you still want a Steam version. If you want a Steam version, shut up. You're going to get an Epic code and a Steam code. You don't have to use the Epic code. You can wait, and I know you've got to wait a year, but you're getting 2 games still. These people that complaining and getting upset over very, very slim things, really, when you think about it at the end of the day. For Kickstarter, I mean, these things I backed on Indiegogo, I haven't seen a penny since. I've not seen the product since. I backed the bloody Spectrum Vega Plus handheld thing
Yeah.
5 years ago, whatever. They ran off with the money. It was a scam. I'm £100 down. There's nothing I could do about it. This, on the other hand, you can get your money back. You can get 2 copies of the game. You can switch it to a PS4 game. Bloody hell, you're spoilt for choice, really, on generosity, and yet still people are upset.
I know.
It's completely crazy. This sort of mentality a lot of people have got. It's our age. I don't know what it is these days. I would never have complained when I was 14 if someone, I was upset with something, and you know what I mean, you take a game back in Game Store and they give you a refund, you're not still going to be upset about that, are you?
Got
You're
your
like,
money
oh,
back.
that's fair enough, I'm getting my money back. But this day and age, entitlement is unreal, really. They want, I don't know what they want. What would people have been satisfied with in this scenario? Would they have been satisfied if they got Steam day one, they got the money back as well, they still got all the rewards, free postage, they got all the money back and the games? Would they have been satisfied then? I still don't think so.
It begs the question, doesn't it, as to how far they'd have had to have gone. Take away the issues around Epic and everything else. How far would Wisenet had to have gone to satisfy that need?
I don't think they could have. I don't think there's a
they could have.
point.
I think your point is spot on, and I do think there's entitlement to it. I really, really do. That's not to say it wasn't a cock up from the decision that was made, but at the same time, the misinformation going around, especially about Steam, where people were passing this off as fact, and it wasn't, it beggars belief. It really does, that somebody, again, but it comes back to clickbait, doesn't it? That you don't need to do research. You go, Steam was promised, Epic bad, boom, there's your click.
Yeah.
Whereas had they gone and looked at the original Kickstarter, they would have seen Steam was not there. Had they had a had a survey, they'd have realised it was. and then you can do the math and work things out. But that doesn't give you clicks at the end of the day. But I also think Shenmue, even these days, is a glutton for punishment in the media, one way or the other. It carries weight, the Shenmue name. It really does. Whether you like it or not, it carries weight. So it gets clicks. Now, it's easy to get clicks through negative press than it is positive press. So they go that way. I mean, with something like the anime, which was highly positive, any negativity just got drowned out. But in this situation, it was so much easier to go that way. Whatever you think of the Epic deal itself, it was just they were on a hiding to nothing. As soon as that happened, they were on a hiding to nothing with that deal, and the press jumped on it, especially the whole Steam thing. And to this day, people even go, "I was promised Steam." No, you weren't. Unless you backed from June 2018, you were not categorically promised Steam. And that's it.
That's it at the end of the day. Right, so we're going to take another short musical break. Matt, I'm going to go back to you again with your second music pick. This is your second final pick. What have you picked?
Yeah, so this is Secret of a Warehouse. It is the nighttime theme in Shenmue 3. You only get the first sort of 10, probably even 10
In Bailey
seconds.
Village.
Yeah, in Bailey Village, and the Owl, I think, as well.
Okay, so
And
it does hold a little bit of substance then.
Yeah, it does, but you don't often hear the extended version. The extended version is quite a cool track. So yeah, Secrets of a Warehouse.
Let's play that now then. Welcome back. That was Secret of a Warehouse from Shenmue 3's soundtracks. Seeing as they were sort of going on a Shenmue 3 deep dive in terms of media outcry and stuff. And so let's move straight into point number 6, Matt.
Yes. Now this one, I think, probably divides opinion and divides views. It's nowhere near as controversial as some of the stuff that's gone around, but again, it's another bit of PR that's not good. So, as we all know, Kickstarter backers, Slacker backers got specific rewards. You got the jacket, you got the phone card, and some other bits and pieces, and a move scroll in game. Retail copies got some other bits. They got some other moves. They got the Peking Power Pack or something as well. We get a load of Peking Duck and some bits and pieces.
And there's also the collector's editions,
yes,
physical items as well.
Yeah, you've picked those up, and I didn't even write that down on here. So there was, as you say, there's collector's editions. So the media here, actually, in fairness to them, weren't particularly, they weren't factually incorrect, but it was the way things were worded that I think didn't help. I mean, WCCFtech.com, I'm just going to read this out. It says, well, another day, another situation where Wisenet and Shenmue 3 is in a spotlight for the absolutely wrong reason. Irrespective of Wisenet getting financial support from Sony, Deep Silver, and then a cash advance from Epic's game. Wrong, they did not get a cash advance from Epic game. You need to correct that, because that is completely incorrect. To become an Epic Score timed exclusive, there's another issue that's come over the horizon, and it's all the fault of Wisenet. Is it?
Okay, I'm sure it is, yeah.
In this case, backers of the game on Kickstarter will not get pre-order content that comes with the regular deluxe release of the game. Well, first and foremost, those launch editions were made as they were done. That's a Deep Silver decision along with Wisenet, probably. So you're pointing the finger completely at Wisenet when it's clearly not all their fault, if their fault at all. And then secondly, when I backed, and this is me personally, when I backed this Kickstarter, I backed it for the reward tier, and I got the 4 capsules and the in-game stuff. I did not care or think I would be getting any of the pre-order content, any of the collector's content editions that may have come out, or anything in addition to what I'd backed at that time. Did you?
So, Matt, what you're saying is the people that pre-ordered the game for retail didn't get any of the Kickstarter rewards either.
I'm exactly saying that.
So you're telling me that every single person that pre-ordered the game didn't get a Shenmue 3 character boost?
I am.
Why did they not pick up on that?
I don't know.
That is insane.
I don't know.
Isn't it,
that? We're joking about it, and there is a serious point to make here in that it could have been a nice thing for them to do. Yeah, backers. Do you know what, guys? Thank you very much for being backers.
So this was the only way to get, say, like the Chobu-chan DLC and the story pack DLC and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
So to get like 100% version, you'd have had to have sort of bought like the day one edition and then the DLC.
So you're buying the game a second time? Or,
which,
I assume you can buy the DLC separately. You don't have to buy the game again.
Yeah. And there was a season pass as well, which didn't come in with the Kickstarter stuff as well. But again, when I backed the Kickstarter, I didn't assume I was getting any of that. I assumed I was getting my game at like dirt cheap, bearing in mind with all the rewards. So I personally, this is a personal thing, I do not see the issue at all with Wisenet, Deep Silver wanting to market to a broader range of people to buy the game. Isn't that the point? To make money.
Oh, yeah. And like you say, I know I was joking a little bit, but when you back the game, you clearly know what rewards you're going to get because it's detailed on Kickstarter. And the people that are buying the game in a shop, whether they got the collector's edition, physical collector's edition day one, they know what they're buying. They're buying all the items that come with that edition. They know, or perhaps they might not know if they haven't looked on Kickstarter, but they're not getting those Kickstarter rewards that we got. So it's the same situation either way, whether you're a Kickstarter backer, whether you're a day one purchaser. The fact that there's some slight differences between them, different items, different rewards. This comes with DLC or something that wasn't even a thing back in the Kickstarter days. Is kind of irrelevant, really, because you back that on the assumption of these items that you're going to get, and you got those as rewards. You didn't get a prefix at the bottom of those rewards on Kickstarter that says, and any additional shit that we may end up releasing at retail. That wasn't on the cards.
No, exactly.
This is just another situation to, again, it's positive for the series. It's like people that may have, because at the end of the day, they're trying to get more sales for Shenmue 3, aren't they? That's what they want.
They're trying to make as much money out of it as they can.
You've got 63,000 1,000 backers on Kickstarter or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They know that those people are tied into a game. They're not going to buy the game.
Yeah.
So you've got to then target to a different audience who are seeing the game that's completely finished now. You're going to get your day one release trailer. People are going to view that and think, oh, this looks pretty cool. What are my options for buying this game? And if Kickstarter was your only option, they've got no option to buy the game. So there has to be another way of buying the game.
Exactly.
And along with that are extra incentives to persuade that buyer that there's some worth in me buying this game today, kind of thing, rather than going back in time 5 years ago, which isn't possible. There's got to be something extra to convince a new potential buyer, because you've got to think the person buying it on November the 19th, 2019, or whatever the date was, isn't particularly a die-hard Shenmue fan.
No.
Maybe they are. They didn't back it on the Kickstarter, maybe they missed it or whatever, and they were a die-hard fan, but those die-hard fans have already bought the game.
Yeah.
So there's a different audience they've kind of got to tailor-make and market a game to.
Exactly that. You can't just give things away. Now, it would have been cool. It would have been some good PR. I don't deny that in any way, shape, or form. I really don't. But I mean, how entitled does this sound? I mean, this is from Destructoid. Throw in a season pass that has undefined content and is also not being given to backers, and this has really become a crappy situation. It seems that WiseNet would rather segment out Shenmue 3 than provide an easy way to get the entire experience, which is certainly reason enough to be agitated. Well, I'm sorry. That is the height of entitlement in my book. I am not entitled as a Kickstarter backer, knowing what I was getting, to get any of the retail stuff. If I choose to buy it, and I did, because I'm a nutter at the end of the day, I'm a hardcore Shenmue fan, and I will support the franchise. It is my choice to buy that content if I want to. But from a publisher point of view, from a WiseNet point of view, from a business point of view, they need to get people in to make money. So having alternate versions, having alternate collector's editions, having alternate retailer editions, that is the norm in gaming now. That is what happens. I am not entitled, right, because by some people's logic, if I went and bought a game at Asda, and they give me some exclusive content, I should then be getting the exclusive content from Tesco. It doesn't work that way. No. You know what you're getting, and that is it. If you want to get X, Y, and Z, and then you obviously have to go to X, Y, and Z stop.
I get your point there. And on that same basis, you're not going into Tesco in 2019, picking up a game, and then in 2021 they released the ultimate version that's got all the DLC that they released at, and then turning around and saying like, well, why aren't I getting that for free? Because I bought the game in 2019. I should get all that DLC for free. It's the same situation with every game that's released these days.
It is, and it's a situation I don't like in gaming. I'm old school like you, James. I pull out my Mega Drive cartridge and it's complete, warts and all. I'm getting the entire experience in that game, and I do take issue with DLC. I do take issue with a lot of it.
Well, a lot of the current situation for me is games that I've bought on PS4 are getting upgrades to PS5, and it just makes my mentality like I've got an inferior version. I bought the Pix and Love Yakuza 7 on PS4 when that first came out. I've paid for that purchase. Nothing I can do about it. And then 6 months down the line, they announced the same thing, but instead inside as a PS5 case. I feel like I've got an inferior version. I do understand the differences in these things, but at the end of the day, you knew what you bought at the time. And if something changes along that timeline, you're not instantly entitled to it.
No, you're not. You're not. Absolutely right. And a flip side, Microsoft have actually in this situation been very, very good in that when you think about you get an Xbox Series X, you get all the free upgrades for your old games in terms of frame rates, etc.
That's cool.
That's really cool, right? That's brilliant. Well done, Microsoft. I take my hat off to you for doing that, because that's got you so much good PR. Well done. But I'm not entitled to it.
But at the same time, we're not suggesting that, like you say, Shenmue 3, WiseNet or whatever, if they'd have turned around and said, don't worry, Kickstarter backers, we're going to throw in all the DLC for you as well, as a gesture. for sticking with us for the last 4 years. That would have been amazing. That
Yeah.
we're not denying that they could have done that for the good PR, like Microsoft are doing with what you've just described, Matt. But that wasn't the case, and
No.
at the end of the day, decisions are decisions, aren't they? It's
Yeah.
not ultimately WiseNet, or it's not ultimately Yu Suzuki saying, no, fuck them, we don't want to give them all the DLC, let's make them pay again. There's so many people with the fingers in the pie. There you go, that's the
Yeah.
phrase, I think.
You're
Yeah.
quite right. I mean, at the end of the
It's
day,
so difficult to structure a product at that point that realistically works for everyone.
yeah, and at the end of the day, it has to make money. It's what it comes down to. And yes, it would have been a cool gesture. Yes, it would have been some good PR, but people who were expecting to get this stuff, I'm sorry, but I don't know how you can expect to get the DLC when it's not mentioned anywhere on the Kickstarter or any of the other bits and pieces. I really don't. But then it is symptomatic of gaming today in terms of DLC and extra content, which I take issue with on a different level anyway. But because it's Shenmue, I will buy it, and that's the way it goes, unfortunately. And I'm there to be milked as a Shenmue fan because I want to support the series. It's not entitlement.
I also, even though the announced DLC, I wasn't particularly disappointed either, because we've come to expect that from games these days. Nearly every single game has some form of DLC. It's just something that happens, and in a sense, being a Shenmue fan, although I would like that DLC to be on a disc, which it is, that's why we're getting the complete collector's edition, which is obviously another purchase. But as a Shenmue fan, that's a positive thing because I'm getting the complete edition. But what I mean is, back in 2019, I only see DLC as it's kind of a good thing because it's generating an extra bit of income that we ultimately want to go towards a Shenmue 4 project or whatever WiseNet are considering doing with income at that point. So any little extra incentive they can get to generate more income, whether it be from sales of the game, extra items like we mentioned with the collector's editions, whether DLC, all these extra little bits of avenue. And that ties back to Sega as well with whatever they're releasing merchandise wise. I don't know if Yu Suzuki's getting a cut of that.
Yeah,
The clone. You don't know what these deals are, but the fact is, anything that sells with Shenmue's name behind it, the anime included, it's got to be going somewhere, and hopefully that somewhere is the next game in the series, so that they don't have to worry about a 15-year wait. They don't have to worry about a Kickstarter where fans need to give the life savings across to make something that they've been waiting for a reality. All these little avenues and outlets, and these anything for gaining a little extra little bit of income, like the DLC. At the time, that didn't really disappoint me or didn't really upset me, because ultimately, me paying an extra tenner or whatever it was at the time is an extra tenner I wanted to give to WiseNet. It's the ability to do it. If you open up a donation page, for example, if WiseNet say donate money, it's going to go to Shenmue 4, they're already going to see a cent. If they have something relevant to give back to the person donating, in this sense, DLC or Sword of the Seven Stars replica sword,
yeah,
like Limited Run Games are doing, people are going to buy that,
yeah,
and that is money that's going into a future Shenmue product.
exactly.
So they've kind of got to do that sort of stuff. I don't disagree with them releasing DLC, because and they didn't milk it. They didn't have like they could have milked it and have loads of costumes for Rio that those get stuff that you can purchase in game, in game currency. It's if they really wanted to milk it, they would have gone down there. But at the end of the day, the only things that they did DLC wise, to me, apart from the story DLC perhaps, everything else felt like they'd created that since, if that
Yeah,
makes sense, because there
yeah,
were different modes, different ways of playing the game. It's not stuff that felt like it had been stripped out of the game to make more money. It felt like we've got a bit of time, we've got a bit of freedom to do what we want, some fun stuff for the Shenmue fans. Let's release that as DLC and use that money. We don't know where they are with Shenmue 4. That's the thing. They could
no,
be close to announcing it because of sales of DLC.
no,
No one knows what the situation is in regarding WiseNet. They're going to announce something this year, that is for certain, because Yu Suzuki said that. So until we find out what that is, we don't know what has been fueling the income at the company there to make that thing a reality. So if it was DLC and all this sort of stuff that happened in 2019 that people are obviously kicking off about here because they didn't get all the way back in 2015, then I'm sorry, but it's a positive at the end of the day because it's made something else out of that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does make absolute sense, and it just goes back to the point they need to make money at the end of the day, and I just, I'm fine with it. I'm absolutely fine with it. Good PR aside, if they'd have done it, fine. But I'm good with it. I'm good with other games doing it. I don't sit there and look at it and go, well, I ordered my £60 version of a game, but I want all the stuff in other subsequent versions or whatever. No, it's unfortunately it's the height of entitlement these days, and it didn't help things in the grand scheme of things. But it is what it is. I don't think the majority of the community were too bothered by it, but wider, I can see how the knife was being twisted.
Yeah.
So, on that analogy, it takes us to the final point of the sort of the podcast here, and me ranting for the last however many hours. Is that some aspects of the media were going around and saying that Shenmue 3 is the conclusion to the Shenmue series. We know it's not, quite frankly. And there's an article from Escapist basically saying that it should have known better than end on another cliffhanger. Well, we knew it was going to end on a cliffhanger because we've been told it's.
We've had those chapter tiles for so long.
Yeah. There's a lot of chapter tiles there that haven't been gone through. But in fairness, in this respect, actually, to the vast majority of the media, and it's quite nice to end on a bit of a positive note here. There's lots of articles from sort of 2016, 2015 type era. And actually, there's one in the Sony blog from just around the Shenmue 3 release, where Yu Suzuki talks about the future for the series and what he wants to do in terms of the story and progressing it, etc., in terms of the chapter tiles and how many of them he wants to do. He said in Polygon in 2015 that he planned to do 4 or 5 games for the series. If he could still do it, he'd like to, and he'd like to do 11 chapters. Great, we know that. But
at one point, he was touting 6 games, wasn't he? I remember.
He was.
So it's not like it's an uncommon thing for him to be wrapping up the series with Shenmue 3. You know, he'd already outspoken and said that we do need, like you just said, 4 or 5 games, and he'd personally like to take it to 6 games, which I don't know how realistic that is in terms of how long between releases.
You mentioned that 6th game, actually, and Sega Nerds did an interview with him in 2016, and he was saying that actually, they said originally it was due to go to Shenmue 6. Would you still like to do it? And he said, well, no, I don't want to go to a Shenmue 6 anymore. I'd rather rearrange things so that I can reach the end before that point, essentially. He doesn't want to go to a Shenmue 6. Great, okay. I understand that.
Interesting.
This wasn't, if anything with this was more an assumption, I think, from the wider gaming communities than the media themselves, because there's a lot of media articles out there from years and years ago, 20 years ago, even to present day, that are quite well informed that Shenmue as a series isn't a trilogy. It's never was a trilogy.
Well, that's the word that's been thrown around quite a lot.
Yeah.
Throughout these articles, and I know a lot of people were surprised that they always assumed that Shenmue 3 was a trilogy. The Shenmue series was a trilogy, which I don't know where they had that impression from. The fact that they'd wait 15 to 18 years just to release a finishing game seems a bit crazy, to be fair, because they've done a 1-2. If they only really needed one more game, I'm sure somewhere Sega could have mustered up the money to make that a reality for the fans.
Yeah.
The only reason why they probably didn't is because they knew themselves there was 11 chapters and we'd only done 5 max at that point. Do you know what I mean? So they knew full well that their investment would need to cover 4, 5, 6, 3, at the time. That's perhaps why they didn't want to get involved in Shenmue anymore, and it did go on the hiatus it did. So I don't know where people got this 3-game mentality from.
It's a heavy investment when you think of it in those terms, James, from from when Shenmue 2 obviously finished back in 2001. That's a massive investment when you're thinking financially. The original two games haven't done as well as you'd have hoped. To then go, well, I've then got to make another 3 to 4 games. You can see why Sega probably turned around, sort of balked at the idea.
And realistically, from a player's standpoint, if they have reached the end of Shenmue 2, does anyone at the end of Shenmue 2 go in with the mindset that a story could be finished in a third game? Because I don't believe that anyone that has invested the time in the games and got to the end of Shenmue 2, where suddenly it's flipped on its head with the mystical elements and all that sort of stuff, that could have a satisfying conclusion in a third game. Even going into the third game, and obviously knowing that these 11 chapters and all this sort of stuff, before I even knew all that stuff, I knew that there wasn't, it would never be possible to finish the story off in another game, because the way it was going, you can tell by the end of Shenmue 2, the way it's going, there's so much more to figure out. Even as a 14-year-old lad, Shenmue 2 moving into Shenmue 3, I would never have expected them to finish that story when I got to the end of Shenmue 2 in another game. Even if it had released on the Dreamcast, I would have expected more than 3 games. So
no, but you make a very valid point there in terms of the way the story is being told. We know Shenmue was criticised for this as well, that the pace of the story in terms of getting to the payoff, the ultimate payoff, we're not that. We're still not there. But and it's the way that Yu Suzuki wants to tell his story, and quite frankly, I'm all for it. But I didn't assume at 14 that they could smash out a third game and finish it, because I thought, with all this going on, there's got to be a lot out. What's all the background to this? And so many unanswered questions from Shenmue 2 alone and Shenmue 3 in terms of, obviously, we know that obviously Ryo doesn't have the Phoenix Mirror anymore and they're going to the Cliff Temple.
And time-wise, martial arts-wise, in-game time, there's no way you could defeat Lan Di either. Well, people expecting that fight of Shenmue 3 to go in favour of Ryo. I don't know what mentality they're going into that fight with, that suddenly, all of a sudden, he's going from Donu or whatever to Lan Di. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you said before, even seeing that anime trailer where they end with that scene of Ryo and Lan Di on the rooftop, just seeing that as a picture, you were saying that feels rushed. That fight shouldn't exist, because as a gamer playing Shenmue 1 and 2 to the conclusion, we know Ryo's not ready.
No, he's not ready. I mean, in game time, and this is, again, I don't know whether this is logic or not kicking in here, but the game starts in November. At the end of November, Shenmue 1 starts at the end of November. By the time you get to the Lan Di fight in Shenmue 3, you're May time? So you've had essentially 7-8 months training, martial arts training, to take down a master of a deadly martial art. And you haven't had
who killed your father in one hit, who was already an experienced martial artist.
Exactly. And bearing in mind, you haven't had 8 months consistent solid training, because you've been busy hunting sailors, driving forklifts, and playing Lucky Hit. So
exactly. And knowing what we know now, following in our father's footsteps, if Dad at 46 can't even counter a single blow from Lan Di, what hope does Ryo have at this stage?
Exactly. So there's so much around the story, as you've already talked about, that hasn't been answered, that it really couldn't have been possible in a third game. I know we're in the know. We're hardcore fans, so I think to people external of the community, they may see things differently.
I do wonder where this trilogy idea came from, though.
I don't know. I really don't. It must have been put around at some point in the media when we were going through the hiatus. But I would just urge anybody who comes across a person who's talking about the Shenmue trilogy is just to say, well, actually, it's not a trilogy. It's 11 chapters. We're in chapter 5 or whatever it is, or chapter 6 now. There's a long way to go, and there's actually a lot of media articles out there that accurately cover that point.
And in fact, we've kind of skipped a couple of chapters along the way as well.
Yeah, we've lost some on the way. So who knows what's going to happen in the future? But I think positively here, and I have been ranting a lot tonight or today, whenever you pick this up and listen to it, and it does get me, the misinformation, especially when I think it's deliberate. But here, this is actually a positive, that there's a lot of good media coverage high quality media coverage that covers this point very nicely. And I'd urge anybody who's coming into the series for the first time or is unsure and thinks it's a trilogy or whatever, just go and do a bit of research around it and just see what they're planning, what the grand vision was. And
The thing
actually,
I would suggest is go watch that GDC 2014 press
oh
conference,
yes,
because Yu
yes,
Suzuki outlines everything there. Perhaps there's some spoilers in there as well, but I think if you're unsure about where we are in the Shenmue saga, just go watch that GDC press conference. It's about an hour long, but Yu Suzuki goes all the way back to the roots, the Old Man and the Peach Tree prototype. He talks about the Project Berkeley stuff. He goes into his China research trip all the way back 1993 or whatever, where he went to China to research Virtua Fighter 2. And most of that research ended up being what he incorporated into a story of Shenmue. And then he goes into the chapter stuff, which we talked about, which is where we first even saw these chapter tiles that got us all excited about the future of the series, because we started making theories on what this picture represents in what could be, the ongoing saga story wise, and seeing characters pop up again in later chapters. It's like, what are they going to be doing at that point? Who are these new characters we're seeing in these chapter tiles? So he goes through a lot of that stuff, and also how, as a development team back on the Dreamcast days, they managed to do some of these new techniques, these new, like the free genre that he touted back then, the systems that went into the game. It's really interesting. Overall, I would highly recommend just search Shenmue Yu Suzuki GDC 2014 or something. Any variation of that will probably come up on YouTube. Just
yeah,
sit down, watch that, and I think you'll be in the same mindset that me and Matt are, in terms of where we know that the story's going to go, how far or how many more games are required to complete the saga. And for anyone touting a trilogy and disappointed that the Landy fight wasn't the end of the game, I think prior to Shenmue 3 even existing, people were aware that that wasn't going to be a thing.
yeah. I think you've put that point across really succinctly there, James. That's
Thank
a
you.
good note to end my insane 2-hour rant on, I think.
Yeah,
And as I
and takes
say,
people in places where they can go self-discover now.
yeah, go on your own journey of self-discovery. But being serious, and I opened this discussion with saying this, I'm not, and I don't want to tar everybody with the same brush, because as I've said with the last point, there's some good coverage out there, and there was some really good coverage out in the media of Shenmue 3. I look at the Kickstarter. Happy Console Gamer came out really positively about it on YouTube, talking about the Kickstarter, talking about how you could back it, why you should back it, and all the rest of it as well. I'm
Love
going to
Johnny. Yeah.
in his content brilliant, in fairness.
Yeah.
You've got The Escapist and Casually Addicted were putting out good feelers about what the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter was about back in the day. And then again, you've got Jules Shocker's Crash Landed doing it as well. So there were plenty of people out there as well fighting Shenmue's corner. There really
Michael
were.
Huber as well. With the,
Yeah, people like Michael Huber and back at the game trailers back in the day, wasn't it? Now
yeah.
Easy Allies, they are putting the good information out there, the good stuff out there, the right information. I think my biggest takeaway and my final point around this is just please be accurate. That's all it needs to be, accurate and factual. And I hope that we've in our James's discussion and my rant have have given people sort of the facts today or this evening, whenever you pick this up. We've given you the facts to take away and make your own calls on it. We have our opinions on it, and mine are quite strong, of course, and that's probably come across. But I just hope that going forward that we can engage in factual reporting for Shenmue and not this clickbait stuff, which I think has had a negative impact on the franchise. And actually, with the anime, we've seen a lot of positive stuff in the media, and it's all very, very factual. That's what we want at the end of the day,
yeah.
just good factual stuff.
Great stuff, Matt. Okay, so I think that's rounded off this particular episode. Hopefully it's been a good one. I feel like we made some good points. I hopefully haven't just embarrassed ourselves and people hate us now for making all these sort of claims about certain aspects of the media and headlines that people believe are true. And I don't know, we're trying to make out that they're not true, and we have got the supporting evidence that backs those claims up. So hopefully people have took something out of this particular episode. And yeah, if you ever see anyone in the future with infactual agendas, put them straight.
And if you want a further reference point around the sort of Shenmue 3 and all the media coverage and the bedlam around it, I would highly recommend you check out the article over on Megavision's website, written by former Team U guru and owner James Hamill. He put a piece together in July 2019, sort of debunking a lot of the media coverage around Shenmue. I've used some of this for some reference to the points that we've made in the discussion today as well. So make sure you go and check that out.
Yeah, that's a cracking little interview, piece, article, whatever you want to call it, with James Hamill there. I think everyone that's been interested by this particular episode should definitely go over to Megavisions there and check out that article from James Hamill. It's possibly the most definitive truth beyond what we've talked about in this particular episode. If you want to just check that out, reference some of that to naysayers, I don't think you can go far wrong.
No.
So we're going to end the show, as we always do, with a piece of music. And I've selected this one. This is another piece of music from the backers credits. It is called Title 7 in the files. I'm not actually sure what the exact name is. It's not part of the Spotify playlist of songs, but it is one of the ones that you can listen to if you press the backers credits on the Shenmue menu there and just sit through it until it pops up. I think there's about 10 songs actually that play if you just leave the backer credits rolling. So yeah, enjoy guys, and we'll see you again on the next show in probably about 6 weeks time or whatever. Or I think Matt's got a few interviews planned, so look out for them in your podcasting feeds. But yeah, on behalf of Matt and myself, take care guys, and we'll see you again on the next one.
Cheers guys, thank you.
Ah, look at the time.